Hey everyone, welcome to this edition of Treatment News or Treatment Trends. I'm actually broadcasting live from the Foundation's Recovery Network office right now, so exciting there. But as always, Nick Jaworski, CEO of Circle Social. We'll just go around. James, Jacob, Kathy.
Yeah, this is James Hadlock. I'm with Blue Novus, and we help companies more effectively address addiction and mental health in the workplace.
Hey, this is Kathy Fressard, and I work with marketing and business development at Admissions to be effective for organizations. So,
hi there, Jacob Lynch, Stone Ridge Partners. We're a merger and acquisition advisory firm.
So what we're talking about today is reputation in the treatment space, particularly a lot of the bad press that has been coming out, right? So we just had Timberland Knowles came out with the sexual abuse allegations that didn't seem to get taken care of after several allegations, right? Big story in Chicago that I think a lot of people have read. We had a Mother Jones article at the beginning of March that really went to the negative practices that are happening in the space. And they also did a podcast on it. Amethyst Recovery actually got mentioned very heavily in a lot of the negative press around some of the conversations that their admission staff were having and some of the maybe less than upfront ways that they were working with Facebook groups and things like that. And then, we've seen stories and articles coming across about the field in general. Obviously, American Addiction Centers gets a lot, or Recovery Centers of America, back in 2017, it's had some very negative press. So there's a big reputation issue within this space. And so we're going to talk today about what it means to be patient first. So not just addressing reputation from a PR perspective, but how do you address it from a cultural perspective and from a patient-centered approach to actually delivering treatment. So I think I want to start there with everyone's opinions. When we're talking about this reputation management, we're talking about actually building it from culture and patient first. What should centers be looking at, not just damage control, but how do we organize our staff and our spaces to make sure that we're doing the best for patients and then gets translated into what hopefully gets into the media?
I'll jump in. So I think it really starts with we should be focused on the patient experience. So, and I mean that from the minute they first time look at one of our web pages or they call on one of our call centers, anything like that, we should be focused on what's that experience of the patient from the minute they enter into anything around us to the moment they actually leave us, and then after that. And if we do that, we'll keep our focus on what the patient needs. So that's kind of my simple version of, if we do that, it'll force us to do what's the right thing because we're always focused on what they're experiencing.
Well, and I want to just jump in and second that. And we've said this before, but the best marketing is a great program and working from the inside out and making sure that at all those touch points along the process that we're thinking of, in computer jargon, they call it the user experience. And if you think about that first, a lot of times, a lot of those other things are going to be taken care of. So I 100% agree with you, Kathy. I do have some comments, but maybe I'll wait on kind of that damage control and what you can do from the outside in. But I'll wait for a minute before everybody talks about this one in particular.
Yeah, I would agree with you guys. Obviously, knowing your client, your patient, and taking care of them first, keeping them at the forefront of your mind is going to be the most helpful in building a good reputation and clinical success and having a name for that. But I think a lot of these issues that I've heard of or read about all boil down to leadership and then human capital, right? So unless you have built a culture of poor morals and ethics, which you probably haven't if you own some place, then it's down to just 1, 2, 5, 10 employees who maybe their character isn't what you want it to be. And so it's an issue of you leading them in the right direction and making sure that you hire the right people in the first place and then build that culture of this is the brand that we are, not there's a mistake here. And there's going to be mistakes. I've got plenty that I know of that I've represented that things happen. It's business. But then how do you deal with those, as James talked about, is a different conversation. But to minimize those happening requires you to hire quality talent.
Yeah, I think what I really see when you create a patient-first culture is what has happened in some centers that, especially the ones that have been really kind of lambasted in the media, is they built an admissions-first culture, right? Every conversation coming down from leadership was about admissions. How many admissions do we have? How many calls do we have? How many have we converted? And that translates to your team. That becomes their focus. So rather than them talking in their internal conversations back and forth or through emails and through text messages that journalists then get a hold of and publish to the broad world, they should be talking about the patients. It's like, well, this person needs help, and this is how we can try and help get them treatment, either in our program or a different program, whatever it is. But those aren't the conversations that are happening. And I see this in a lot of centers, right, where the conversations of the admissions team and the marketing team revolve 100% around admissions. And that's where these problems stem from, in my opinion. Anyone else have comments on that?
I couldn't agree with that. I'm sorry, James.
No, please go ahead.
Okay, I was just going to say, I couldn't agree more. My first introduction into this industry was not about the census and the stability of the patients. It was literally about phone calls and whether or not the admissions were occurring. So to me, I was a little surprised by that. No matter how patient-centric you are, if your first focus is how many times the phone is ringing, you might be off.
And I would just add to that too, that, the way that we've set up, I mean, I'm very much aware of even how people are paid is very admissions driven. And so even though those metrics and the way that we compensate will tell you where the value is placed. And I think it's a little mixed up when you've got marketing and admissions people making 10 times as much as a therapist.
Yeah, it's a huge issue.
Like, I don't care how patient-centric you say you are. If that's the model, what is that really saying?
Yeah, what's the internal message being sent, right?
And that goes back to what Jacob said about culture and leadership. Like, I think we've got to be more mindful about all of those different messages, and some of that will come down to how much time are you spending on training, how much are you spending on getting quality care placed in through exceptional therapists and clinical and medical teams. But a lot of the time, I think we spend so much on who's got the biggest book of business, who can we bring in, and we're gonna pay them hundreds of thousands of dollars because that's what drives the machine. And I understand it. I mean, I'm an entrepreneur and I get that, but I think it's pretty skewampus when we've got this huge imbalance of where the compensation and what we're looking at and where we tend to spend most of our time.
And it's not long-term sustainable. I don't think people still understand that fact, right? Well, I mean, I know a lot of the people that have been at very high levels at Sovereign, right, at Elements, at Morningside, at Clean, all these centers that went bankrupt and closed down, because when you just focus from a pure admission standpoint, it doesn't drive a culture that's going to build a long-term sustainable business in healthcare. We were just talking to, there's a lot of large programs that we talk to, right? And one of the issues that is happening with a current client is they've got a program that refuses to give calls or let calls be received by the normal call center team, because then they're worried that they're not going to get credit for those admissions, right? Or we see BD teams all the time where the BD teams won't pass anything off to each other. They won't support each other because then they don't get credit for that. There's another very large, very famous center that we're doing a project on right now where they can't get attribution for their digital campaigns if it's been touched by a BD rep. And so it's all about this attribution. There's all this internal struggle and all of this internal fighting going on because they are trying to get attributions for their team and telling who's getting the more submissions, when what should be happening is the BD team should be very happy to support the call center team or the digital marketing team, and vice versa, because how can we help the patient the best? And that's not the discussions that's happening. And that client in particular is really struggling right now. And that would probably be one of the reasons why.
So a big reason that isn't, on the forefront of their mind or their priorities are messed up is think about this industry as a whole. So we've talked about outcomes and results before. If that was the way that you got paid, people would be much more concerned about the patient success, correct? Instead, this whole industry has fee for service, weirdest thing I've ever seen in any industry I've ever worked in, where I get paid whether or not I do a good job. I'm getting paid. So therefore, as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, if I don't have this heart of leader and showing by actions and building a culture, then what's my real incentive? Just as many people in the door as I can, and boom, I keep making money. It doesn't even matter if we're good at what we do. Just keep getting them coming in.
Yeah.
So until that changes to it matters how good of a job you do, you're going to continue to see, like all of you just said, disassociation in priorities, poor judgment and character from some of the employees that are going to lead to bad news and bad reputations and mistakes all over the place.
Yeah. You know, I was talking go ahead, Kathy.
Oh, I was just going to say, what's happening right now, though, is we have to change the type of people that are doing these jobs, because now that the regulations have changed and we don't pay for admissions anymore, or we shouldn't be, and we are asking for a different thing and a different focus, and that we have to change the type of people that we're bringing in, or at least the type of desire that those people have. But we also have to change the leadership view of how they're measuring these people. Because if you still keep measuring them by admissions and you still keep measuring by those things, no matter what you call it, it's still going to do the same thing. And so you have to change both those mindsets.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, because your A-type personalities that tend to be really good salespeople don't want to be in an environment where it's not ultra competitive and that they can kind of earn the sky's the limit based on what they do, right? So you've got to find people that are willing to be collaborative, that are willing to work under a standard salary structure, maybe with group bonuses or different kind of structured, compensation. That's not just a direct admissions relationship. And it's a change of mindset, for the sales and admissions team in terms of who they hire.
It's tough.
One of the other things I wanted to mention was, I was having a conversation again with the COO of another very large, very well-known treatment center. He had come from outside the space, and that was his comment, he's like, we keep saying that we're really good and we're really proud of who we are, but why? Where are our outcomes? Why are we so proud of what we do? And the response he always kept getting from the team was that, well, because when people relapse, they come back to us. They like us so much they come back. And he's like, that just didn't sit well with me at all. It's like, that is not an outcome metric that I'm proud of, right? I guess it's good they're coming back and choosing here, but I would much rather be trumpeting a positive metric of how many people aren't coming back to treatment because they're successful. That would be a better metric on my end. And so that was an interesting conversation that I had. On the reputation end, so I want to jump into this, and Kathy, maybe you want to share, you had a Glassdoor story, I don't know if you want to share that, but this idea that often a lot of centers will look at reputation as damage control, right? So it's like, okay, Timberland Knolls, maybe, I don't know what happens internally there, I'm not talking to anyone over there, but maybe they're like, oh my God, well, we've got to change this message, right? Or we've got to fix the way that this is being perceived, and that's, for me, the wrong approach. But other people that want to comment on that?
I can start with that story. So basically what I was just sharing, we were talking earlier today, is this idea that I could go out and I look at the reviews all the time. We get feedback and we know what the reviews are. So I look at the Glassdoor, and I was looking at Google. I was looking at all these different reviews about how the employee felt, and like sharing that kind of response. And the first thought was, well, we can just get good reviews on top of that. And, yes, where that's nice, that's really not what you do with reviews. It's really about listening to what the root problem is. So I think it's a great way to start this conversation, is that it's not just about responding to a negative review or enhancing a positive review. It's taking those reviews and understanding what the value is. And, of course, responding, of course, engaging, but what's at the root of what you're doing? Because as this industry changes so much, those reviews are really 10 times more important than they ever were before. Anyway, so I think it's just the reaction. We have to teach ourselves how to be different when we're looking at what the review means.
You going to go, Jacob, or am I going to hit it?
Sure. You got it. Go ahead.
Okay. So I have a couple of comments. This last year, I attended an event called Impact Summit in Salt Lake City. It was a pretty big event, and they brought in a speaker. It was all about personal branding. And this gal who, funny enough, has been in the addiction recovery space. She owns a branding and marketing company out in California. And she's written a book and has got, like 1 million followers on all kinds of different social media platforms. She knows a little bit about personal branding. And the first thing she had us do when she started to speak was Google ourselves. And to see what's coming up. Is your narrative coming up online? Because if it's not portraying who you are wanting to portray yourself, then you've got a problem. You've got a branding problem, and you've got a messaging problem. And so that was the first thing that really stuck out. Is I think damage control, if we're trying to do damage control, it's probably already too late.
Agreed.
If we are not taking a proactive approach to pushing out our message and our content and who we are, and creating value for whatever the community is that we want to reach, I think, and it comes back to trust, right? I mean, if I read, in fact, I had heard things about Timberline and a few of these other things. There wasn't enough evidence out there for me to say, oh, that must be an isolated case. But if there was a ton of information out there and sharing stories and really building this narrative prior to that happening, I might think twice, or I might want to investigate a little bit more, going, man, maybe that's an isolated case, or whatever the case may be. So that was one of the things. And then to reinforce that, this just a couple of months ago, I was interviewing, she's very well known, owns a PR firm, and writes for like Forbes magazine, and is very well established, has very big clients all over the country. And when we were just having a kind of off the record conversation, she reinforced that, and she said it this way. She goes, make sure that you push out so much content about who you really are and what you represent, that when something negative comes out there, that it literally gets lost in the wash, which really kind of reinforces what this branding expert says. So she does damage control for very high profile executives. And one of her strategies is you've got to build that narrative before any of that stuff comes out. Because, hey, here's the thing, folks, believe it or not, I've got enemies out there. I do. There are some people that don't align with the way I think, and I'm a little bit of a loud mouth, and some people I'm gonna rub them the wrong way. But if you look at the narrative that I've tried to create, even on a personal level, you see that I'm pushing out some different types of content that really just represent who I am. So you can get a better feel of that. And so with anyone listening and any of our audience out there, I would say it's twofold. I say on a personal level to look at it and do that. And then on a corporate or company level, to make sure that you're bringing value and not just this idea of reacting and doing damage control is just not that effective. I mean, the hurt has already happened. The intervention is going to take probably years to recoup from that.
Yeah, the solution, it's going to be much cheaper and easier, more efficient and better to prevent it rather than to fix it. So that damage control, especially in this day and age with how fed up everyone is with politics and damage control, those that we think we can't trust, we don't know what's going on, the more important that becomes, right? Like, don't think about how to spin the story. All those sort of shady ways around it, take responsibility, tell the truth of your point of view of what happened, and how you're going to go about fixing that. What's the solution? And the real solution should be, to anybody that hasn't had any bad news yet and is worried about the reputation, is to prevent it in the first place. So just like James was just saying, if you're doing that damage control, it's too late. That's correct. Like, at this point, while things are good, you should be taking a test, the gauge of your center, of the employees. What do we do well? What do we do poorly? What can we do better? What do you hear from the other employees? What are you worried about, et cetera? How can we make this place better and better and better? And if you lead that way and show that culture, and that's what you care about, it permeates through the whole organization. It's not just going to be you doing it yourself, and you're not going to have as many, characterless employees making mistakes here and there.
Yeah. It's tell it first and tell it fast, right? And I think something that I want to ask everyone here, and I know that the industry needs to focus on, is being proactive about the story that's being told, not just about their program, but about the field overall. I mean, I can't tell you how sick I am about hearing this constant running narrative. We're like, well, there's a couple bad players in the space, and they're, getting posted in the media. That's what everyone's talking about. Well, that's happening because there is no other narrative. no one is pushing a proactive narrative on the space. No one is doing positive PR for their centers or for their field as a whole. We are allowing that gap to exist, and we are allowing the negative press to take precedence because we're not taking any action. So if we want to change that narrative, it's not complaining about the bad press. It's actually about being proactive in promoting positive press. Comments?
If it bleeds, it leads, right? I think a lot of that is fear, right? So if I think everyone is a little bit worried in the back of their mind, this isn't so much me and on the clinical side, but if we were touting our expertise and success very often and how great it is and that everyone's getting sober, we're making a big difference, we love it and everything, then we're worried that somebody's waiting to shoot a hole in that as soon as we screw up, as soon as something goes wrong. And we're not confident enough that at some point something is going to go wrong. I mean, it's business. There's things that are going to happen. I represent, tried to sell one that he was shut down for almost a year because through no fault of his own, another patient provided a new patient a sleeping pill, and then he passed away. And so they had to shut down for like a year, and that wasn't any fault of the owner. Maybe you could do some more oversight, but you really can't control that. But then that's a terrible reputation, and you've got to go through all that PR nightmare and everything else.
Yeah, I think I was telling you guys a little earlier that I just today before we talked, I Googled positive stories about addiction recovery, and I was able to find some positive ones, but a lot of them were really the narrative around the government and the opioid crisis, and that message that each governor or politician or whatever, they're actually out there trying to get these here's what I'm doing to make a difference. And then I Googled it for just facilities. I just wanted, what facilities doing something great, right? And I didn't find any messages in there. And so it made me think a little bit about self-promoting. Is it wrong to self-promote? I don't think so. I think we have to self-promote because everything we talk about is about breaking the stigma. And this is how we do it. We get the positive messages out there. And I know this is a very sensitive area and people don't want to necessarily have their names out there. I get that. But what good things are happening in the community that you're connected with? That's a good story to tell. And what kind of self-promoting are we doing? Tell you what, politicians are great at it. But they're also great at also pointing out really negative things. So there's that balance that we have to fight as who we are in the industry and what we do.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Well, I mean, I think that was the core of the discussion right there. Talk about being proactive, talk about the reputation, and making sure that it's patient first. Does anyone have anything that they want to add as final thoughts?
As much as I don't like to say it, I think to Kathy's point right there, I think celebrities would be very helpful in that space, right? In promoting and talking well about what what's gone well, right? That they're sober now. Lord knows this country, our society follows celebrities around in their every move of what they do when it's a bad thing. So I'm sure if they said, hey, I was once, addicted to something and now I'm great and it's a battle and it's something I live with and it's a disease and I'm in recovery and so forth, that I think it would be much more accepted and normal than it currently is probably. And we would start to break that stigma.
Yeah, agreed. I guess I'd leave everyone with the thought that, be bold, right? Be courageous. And yeah, you're going to have to put yourself out there and, you're not always going to live up to the standards that you want to be, but as long as you're trying to get there, I think that's what people want to see. I want to see that you're trying to support other people and provide better addiction treatment again and again. And, people will look at it in a very positive light. And I just feel like we have a duty to build this space outside of our own programs. Again, I mean, I own a marketing company, but we do tons of PR for ourselves, for our local law enforcement, for the community as a whole, to promote positive recovery and ways to make that effective. And we don't have to do that, right? That doesn't affect our bottom line. But I think that's onus is on us. And so I think more treatment centers need to take that proactive approach as well.
Yeah, I just keep thinking, why isn't it that each one of us tries to start a social movement in this positive environment, in this space, like as tiny as it is or as big as it is, make that movement happen. And you guys do that every day in the blogs that you're posting and the Just Instagram. If you've ever followed James on Instagram, I get so happy when I read his messages.
It's always so
and
positive.
It's just that little movement. They're always so positive, but like sometimes they really hit like what I need for the day. So, but that's like that's social component. Each of us can do it at all kinds of levels.
Yeah, I agree. Like Foundations runs that, Heroes for Recovery, right? I mean, again, and I think you guys don't even really have that tied to the bottom line for good or bad. Like just this huge movement that you guys run, that you promote to promote recovery. And I bet you most listeners didn't even know that Heroes for Recovery had anything to do with Foundations for Recovery Network, because it was never really connected as far as what they do. All right, everyone. Well, I appreciate the time. We thank you guys, and join us again in 2 weeks. And always remember to hit that subscribe button, and you'll get automatic notifications when we've got a new episode. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. See you later.
Bye.